In this video, I'm going to be discussing NGOs. Everything you need to know about NGOs. What you should put into consideration before forming an NGO. The legal aspect, the accounting, bookkeeping aspect, the human aspects. What often leads to NGOs crashing. I'm really going to go into detail and explain all these things because NGOs are really so vital in society and they're a very good way of getting your voice heard. Hello and welcome to Afrique Trader, where I discuss topics that are of interest to immigrants in diaspora, but of course to other people. And if you are new on my channel or if you haven't subscribed, please do hit that subscribe button. So before setting up an NGO or formalizing it, getting it registered, there's some things you really have to think about and some things that should be in place before going on to take that big step. And the very first is the purpose. What actually is the purpose of your non-governmental organization? I mean, people often have various purposes, but there has to be one key purpose running through the organization. Is it sports? Is it religion? Is it culture? Is it charity? You have to have one purpose. And yes, of course, in a constitution, you often write a lot of other purposes. But the main purpose of that organization has to be very clear. And before it even gets to the step of writing the constitution, you have to be very sure that that purpose you think you have is actually also the purpose that the key members, the founding members have. Because you see cases where you may think that we want to form an NGO and the purpose is to do charity work. But there's one member there thinking that this charity work means like educating his family back home. The money is going to be sent there. So be very sure of your purpose. If it's like something like charity, are all members aligned in what they really have in their minds as the purpose? Where is that charity going to be done? In which country? Is it going to be to an orphanage or for children's education? Be sure that you all really have this one major purpose, because if not, it's quickly going to break up the organization and lead to a mess. The second thing you have to really think about is, do you have enough active members who are ready to get involved and participate? Because forming an NGO, especially initially, it's a lot of work and it's voluntary work. No one is getting paid. Are there enough people that are really ready to run around and also have the ability to run around, to sit down and really go through this boring work of getting a constitution? Because often, you see, there's sometimes in African groups or so, we think, yeah, let's form an NGO. But there are not really enough people who are ready to do all this organizatory work. So do you have enough members that are really ready to run around and do all these things? Then pay particular attention to the leadership. This is very vital. A lot of organizations collapse with the leadership, especially the initial leadership. Because you can often have situations where there's one person who is really charismatic. He comes up with this great idea, this great vision. Oh, let's form an NGO, we'll do this, we'll do that. And This charisma kind of draws everybody along. But when somebody is too charismatic, it's very, very negative for any organization. Because people that are very charismatic could sometimes have a lot of dreams, but they don't have the organizational skills. So they keep coming up with very grandiose plans, and then they expect some other members to take that dog out for a walk. And this gets very exhausting for members. It frustrates members because they are saddled with so many things that have to be done, which are sometimes not even realistic. And of course, an over-charismatic leader that is pulling everybody together or so has the tendency to believe that this is my baby, this is my thing, and probably has it in the back of his mind or her mind that it's going to be like a lifelong tenure, and that they're going to have the say till the bitter end. The NGO will be formed, and even though it says 3 years in the Constitution, I'm actually going to be sitting there for life. So be very sure about the leadership, especially at the initial stage. Even when a leader like that comes in, when an organization has been formed, they start causing havoc with these grandiose plans and not wanting to leave. And you see that sometimes it's difficult for successors to even take over, because they won't even hand over the books of the organization or the property. The successors don't even know what was really going on in the organization. You could be sitting there, you could take over the leadership of an organization, and suddenly letters start flying in from everywhere. Bills that haven't been paid, or from projects that were started that nobody really knew about in the organization. And now it's all on your head as the leader, because whatever a leader messes up, when he goes officially, he's gone. It is the organization and the new leadership that has to deal with all those problems. So really be very focused on the leadership, especially at the beginning of an organization. And this also flows into the next topic, the identity of the NGO. I have this impression that many people just want to form an NGO to have like the benefits, maybe being exempted from tax, or having access to facilities or funds from the government. Or so I say I'm doing integration work, so I have access to funds. But they never really had the intention of changing the identity of that group. What I mean is, they wanted it to be their thing. But when you create an NGO and register it, it becomes a new person, a new legal entity, which means you can do all the work, sweat, toil, invest your money for 5 years and form an NGO. But after that, it could be taken over by new people. So be very sure on the identity of this NGO you want to form. If you want to form something that belongs to you, make it a family thing, form it as a family group. You can invite members to join, but don't gather people to come together and form an NGO thinking like they are creating a new legal entity, while the founding member or members had something different in their mind. So these are the things that should be talked about, and be very specific on them, because these things really do mess up NGOs. The A and O of any NGO is the Constitution. So I'm going to go into those vital things that have to be contained in the Constitution, especially where we have to be careful. But before I do that, I would like to really stress on this. A lot of Africans in diaspora have NGOs where they just believe that the Constitution is not important. They just don't abide by that Constitution. See, often it happens this way, that people just want to form an NGO. So what do? You go and look for a template. Now in this euphoria of saying, oh, let's register it, let's move a step forward. You just take a template somewhere. Okay, this is also a charity organization. Let's use their template. You just see that Constitution you are using as a document to fulfill the registration requirements. But you don't realize that that Constitution is the A and O. When problems arise, if it ever gets to that stage that is going to litigation, the court is going to look at the Constitution. Any other thing you say will be irrelevant. So you can see a case like you might have an NGO that has been calling meetings over the years. The secretary will just write a meeting, come 4 days, in 4 days we're having a meeting. Now, you could go to one of these meetings and take a vital decision. But in your Constitution, it clearly stipulates that the meeting should be called in 2 weeks. And if you are 1 day short of that 2 weeks, whatever decision is taken in that meeting is null and void. This is a mistake we often make. We just take any Constitution, okay, we fulfill the requirements, and then we don't really adhere strictly to this Constitution. So, when adopting a Constitution for your NGO, it's very vital. It's really a major point that you adopt a Constitution that really tallies with what you are doing and how you can do it. No point stipulating in your Constitution members should donate 500 a year when nobody's actually really going to do it, or creating hundreds of posts when nobody is there to sit on those positions. So when adopting the Constitution, really take your time, make sure you've gone through the Constitution. These are requirements that the organization can really fulfill and that members are also ready to abide with. So now let's look at some aspects, some things that have to be included in every Constitution. Of course, nobody just, sits down to write a Constitution like that. You would have to get like 2, 3, 4 different templates. So go into the internet and search for NGOs that are doing like similar things like you are doing. Get down their constitutions, and from like 2, 3, 4 templates, now create your own Constitution suited to your own circumstances. What is contained in the Constitution? The Constitution would normally start with a preamble, which of course will kind of like state the purpose of coming together to form this thing, the key purpose, to enhance our spiritual life and this or that. We've come together to form this Constitution, something in that line. So you'd have a preamble. And of course, it's good you really think about this preamble, because it's actually like, you know, the main purpose or reason of coming together. So you wouldn't just want to be going to change it up and down. A constitution does have amendments every now and then, but you don't want to keep making amendments, because often you see in an NGO, people make a lot of amendments, and sometime or the other, when they are asked to bring their constitution, they don't even know which one is the actual constitution. They're not even following up again on the amendments. And of course, you know that all these amendments have to be documented and also submitted. When it comes to taking a name for the NGO, you may have one already, but you need to do some research to know if that name already exists, because you can't use a name that is already existing in that country, or use a name that doesn't really reflect what the NGO is doing or is misleading. It's also something like, say, Charity International, but you are just doing something local. So take time to think about the right name. Do your research to know if that name is already existing in your country, or if you are going to have problems later on with the name. Also, if it's a name you really like, really think about it, because when you start working with one name and somewhere in between you change the name, it's like getting the organization, having to advertise the organization all over again. So be very conscious when choosing a name about all these things. Also reflect on what would happen in the future when you want to open a web page or so. How would the name look like on the web page, and would people be able to locate it and all that? So the right name for the organization is also very important. And of course, you know, it also helps to send out a message. You know, it's like the flagship for the organization. Then to the purpose, of course, the first 2-3 purposes you are going to write down in those articles are going to really focus on the main purpose of that organization. But you'd see that a lot of NGOs, constitutions normally have a lot of various purposes to make sure that in future, you know, when you decide to do something, then you don't have to go changing the constitution again, you know. So you'd see that there are a lot of purposes, and a lot of them, the NGO may not even get round to doing them. So that's not really important, that you are not going to do a lot of those things that come under. But the first at least 1 to 3, 4, 5 purposes you state, you should try and really make sure that they are like in line with what the organization, the NGO, intends to do. And of course, be very aware that you cannot do anything if it's not stipulated in the Constitution. And be sure to agree on what purpose you want, because you might start an NGO with the purpose of, and say, okay, let's put as the purpose, you know, sending money to Nigeria or sending money to Ghana. But later members come from different countries and now want to extend this charity to other countries. But if the real intention and idea was to send this money to one particular country, it should be so fixed in the purposes that it would be obvious to everyone that this actually is the main reason of creating the NGO. Then there's the issue of membership. Often when people hear membership, they think it's so uncomplicated. Oh, okay, we want members that are from this country or belong to this faith. But this membership often brings issues later. So there are some things you have to look at when it comes to membership. Who actually do you want as a member in your organization? Has to be very clear. Is it a cultural organization, so you only want members from a particular tribe or people that have interest in that particular tribe, culture, or something? Be very clear on that. Also, if this NGO is like cultural and a lot of things is done with families, also be clear on membership. Is it a sole membership, or when a couple is there, does the man and the wife have to register as a member, or is it a family membership? How are members admitted into the NGO? How do they become members? Very often, some things are like agreed on or so, put in the constitution, but people don't abide by it later. So be very clear on the procedure of becoming a member. If the procedure is that people have to pay an application fee, fill out a form, adhere to it and insist on it from the beginning. Because what you don't start at the beginning, it's difficult to come back and ask, suddenly you come after 3 years and say, okay, now let's, no. Stick to it from the beginning. Everybody should fill the form. Then let even the founding members fill that form and have them documented so that as new members join, they would also comply with that. And also, bear in mind that there could be different kind of members, honorary members, or is it everybody just the same type of membership? So look at other templates and hopefully you'll be able to find some also from other African NGOs in diaspora and see how they did their. And just as you are clear on how members are admitted into the NGO, you should also stipulate how membership is lost in the NGO by death or disciplinary action. All those things should be thought about when it comes to membership. Officials, the positions being held in the NGO should be stipulated in the constitution. Now, there are some that are actually really required by law. So you should have the chairman, president, for the accounts, you should have someone, a secretary. There are some basic positions that you can't compromise on. Other positions are a matter of choice. What I would advise is that if the NGO isn't such a large one, don't create too many positions in the constitution, because sometimes you have so many positions and you have more people sitting on the board in the executive than you even have members. You can have like 15 members in a position of authority and then just 4 members sitting there that don't have any post. So the number of officials you have, people on your board and all that, should really somehow, be a reflection on the amount of members you have. Then in a constitution, you can also create committees. Very often, it's difficult to, deliberate on everything or to carry out reasonable projects when everything comes into the general house. So you can also make stipulations in your constitution for committees. But also here, be careful, because sometimes we have grandiose ideas when we are forming something. We'll have this committee, we'll have this committee. But you don't even have the manpower for these committees. So keep it very modest and realistic when it comes to the Constitution, because you can always go ahead and change this stipulation or add a new committee by making an amendment to your Constitution. Meetings. Meetings is also something that leads to a lot of challenges in an organization. It causes a lot of issues. It's very important that you stipulate how meetings can be called and the length of notice. Who calls for those meetings? In an African NGO, you have to give this a deep thought, because if the chairman is calling for the meetings, when there's a conflict, the whole NGO is at the mercy of the chairman, who may just decide not to call the meeting. So it's always advisable that the meeting is called by someone else. So you might have a stipulation that the meetings are being called by the secretary, but also have a stipulation about what happens when the chairman does not call the meeting. And I'll have to jump to that too, back to that. It should be contained in your Constitution when meetings are to be held. Is it to be called monthly, annually? Make it really clear when meetings are to be held, so that the secretary or whoever is supposed to call the meeting cannot just decide to use the strategy of not calling a meeting to jeopardize the NGO, or as a method of solving a problem, just don't call a meeting, you know. So it has to be clear that maybe meetings are supposed to be called at least every month or on the first Saturday or whatever. Have that in your Constitution when meetings should be called. So you have to stipulate when meetings are to be called. You have to stipulate who is to call the meeting, and also an alternative if that person does not call the meeting at that time, that it could be. And this is really a Constitution. A lot of things you have the freedom to do that. You could say the meeting could be called if 3 members demand it, or if the vice president, or if 2 other executives. I mean, you can be free there, but really think about your organization and how you would want it there. But stipulate clearly who is calling the meeting and who would call the meeting if that person refuses to call the meeting. This is really important in African organizations. Believe you me, it's one hell of a problem we have, because this not calling of meeting is a very good strategy of, pushing a topic under a carpet, or maybe you don't want re-election, so you just don't call a meeting. Yes, and also topic of meeting, the quorum. How many people have to be in attendance for a valid meeting to take place? You have to stipulate that. It can either be in numbers or in percentage, but stipulate the quorum so that people don't just go taking decisions or calling a meeting strategically at a day or time when they know everybody is not around and wouldn't attend the meeting. Have a quorum. How many members at least must be present before a meeting can actually be held and a valid decision taken. Another thing you'd like to have in your Constitution is disciplinary measures. What does it take for a member to be expelled or suspended or how is the member being cautioned. It's very important to have this in the Constitution, because if ever a dispute arises in future or a member is really unruly, it's going to be really a tough one getting the member out of the NGO or suspending the member, because the court is going to look at that Constitution, and if you haven't made a clear provision for it, then it's going to be difficult. So be very precise on what are the things that could lead to a suspension, what are the things that could lead to the expulsion, and the process that has to be followed to expel or suspend a member. And it's important there also that the Constitution reflects that a fair process has been carried out, that the member is given time to, voice themselves on the accusation, like you have to give it to them in writing, and then maybe give them a time frame in which they can reply and state what they have in their defense. And also, who carries out this disciplinary action? Is it going to be in the meetings in the House, or do you have a disciplinary committee? Who is responsible for that? Don't put this disciplinary action in the hand of the leader of the NGO, or maybe just also in the hand of him and a few executives, because normally when conflict arises, because members are viewing their own opinions and the executive or the leader does not want to buy that view, and then it leads to conflict. So be very clear on your disciplinary measures and how they are effective. Something else that is of importance in African NGOs, in diasporas, and I think it is also important to many organizations, is the benefits members have. It's also a very dicey one, because it often leads to issues. Now, a lot of NGOs in diaspora, especially the cultural ones, often have this stipulation that if a member dies, the corpse would be sent home. So before you do that, be sure of the strength of your NGO, the members, and also if that money can be raised, because you may write in your Constitution benefits for members when a member has a child, gets married. But what do you do if 5-10 members get married that year? Can you raise that money? So when it comes to the benefit, think about it and know how to put it in your Constitution, because if you put something in your Constitution, then it's being owed to the member. Another article that you don't often find in constitutions that I would recommend is this confidentiality, especially members holding positions in the organization, that they shouldn't disclose this information that they have access to by virtue of their position, or only under certain conditions or with approval. And that also leads me to this issue of the publicity. Who is allowed to represent the organization out there, so that you don't just have a member jump into the newspaper writing something about your organization or so when not authorized. So you can also look at that if you would want to make a stipulation in your Constitution. Very vital in a Constitution is also elections. It should be very specific when elections are taking place. That should be really specific. This one problem, one challenge in African NGOs often you see cases that people elected into a post don't want to leave that post. So be very specific on how long a tenure lasts and when elections are to be called for. And also, I'm going to discuss this again in the amendments. Make it very clear that these are things that cannot be easily amended in the Constitution. You might put in stipulations like 3/4 votes to amend that, or even more, so that that's not being tampered with, because very often when people want to stay in office, they would quickly want to amend the Constitution. So make it very difficult for the tenure to be amended. Also, the eligibility. Maybe how long does someone have to be a member before being eligible to be voted for? Who can vote? Also, maybe you might want to put in a stipulation that someone cannot run for the same post 2 consecutive times. All these things should be really thought about and put into the Constitution. And when it comes to amendments, be very specific on how the Constitution can be amended. So there are some things that should be easily amended that are not too vital. But when it comes to things like name of the organization or tenure of office, such things, please be very specific in the Constitution and don't make it easily amendable. Something I want to add here, and this is not necessarily contained in a Constitution, is about the minutes being taken during the meetings, because it's very vital in every NGO that minutes are being taken. These minutes are needed even for finance purposes and for other purposes, or if there's any issue later, and even to know what is going on in the NGO. So minutes are really a must. Now, one mistake that a lot of NGOs make that really hooks them is they keep very long minutes. And this is particularly difficult if you have an NGO and you're writing all your minutes, like say in one language, but the official language in that country is another one. When it's time to produce these minutes, you have to produce them in the language of that country. So I'll advise, keep your minutes very short. The minutes of a meeting should not be longer than 1 page. All you need on your minutes is the issues that came up, the decision taken, where the meeting took place, date, venue, time, and members in attendance, and it's signed. If you want to have a very detailed minute, make a protocol of that meeting and write down everything, but also make a minute for that meeting so that you can be keeping your protocols, but the minutes that are signed and which eventually have to be translated have to be very short, because sometimes if no member is able to do that, you may even run into a lot of expenses translating that minute. Or if you ask a member to do that, he's going to go like crazy, giving him 5-6 pages to translate. Then this person said this, Mr. B raised his hand, Mr. C said it wouldn't. No, just the issues, what came up in the agenda of the minutes, the agenda of the meeting, and the decision taking. And before I go into the accounts, I would like to look at what happens if the organization is shut down. Because unfortunately, sometimes NGOs don't work out. Maybe the people are no longer interested, or there's a lot of dispute, and then the NGO will have to be closed down. So also make stipulations for that in the event of the NGO being dissolved. Where is the money in the purse going to? Also, you need to have internal auditing for your accounts. So that too should be stipulated in the Constitution, how the accounts will be internally audited, where 2 or 3 people would have a look at the accounts to make sure that everything is okay before being handed out to a professional, or before you go on and do that, because normally these things have to be signed by the executive and also the internal auditors. So how to keep accounts? Even if you don't have any experience in bookkeeping in the NGO, a very good way to keep accounts is to break it up and record things separately. So you would have one spreadsheet, or most people use computer now. You can use a simple Excel program, or even in a book or whatever. Have one spreadsheet for membership dues, have one for entertainment, have one for rents, have one for office material. So for those things that come up every once in a while, have a different spreadsheet so that you don't mix everything up. So basically use the same format, You'll have a rubric, date. The next rubric will be cash or bank, then description, and then income or expenses. And then, you will head each sheet or each piece of paper or book, however you keep it, membership dues. So here you have the date, 3rd of March, then was it paid into the bank or was it cash? Then description, the name of the member. Then of course this is now an income, 20 euro. That way you list all the membership dues on one sheet. Don't mix it up with other things. If you were giving receipts to members and you have copy of those receipts, tack those copies on that one sheet, membership. When it comes to rents, you have again rent, one rubric date, did you pay through your bank or cash? Description, rent for this whole Christmas party, now it's an expense. All the receipts you have, tack them on that sheet of paper. That's rent. The same thing when you are doing social activities. Don't mix everything together. Have your spreadsheet, social activities. Now, if you, let's say you throw a grill party on the 3rd of April, get a separate piece of paper where you have grill party 3rd of April. Make another sheet with this same date, cash or bank, description, income, outcome. Then attach all the receipts for every penny you gave out for that party. If you have to give a member money, like to provide something where you don't have a receipt, you can create one, let him sign, attach it to that paper. If you have another function, do the same thing. Then now if you have 5 functions, you have these 5 sheets attached to this one major sheet where you have your social activities. So you would see on the social activities, date, bank, or now you don't even need to put this bank or cash because you have these other sheets attached. You just put your date, description, grill party in April, another description, Christmas party. Then behind these things are now attached these separate sheets which contain the listing of every money that was given out, bank or cash. They are all attached to that one sheet. The same thing for donations members make. Make a separate sheet. So when you have all these things recorded on different sheets, not everything together, rent, then party activity, everything on one sheet. No, for those things that keep reoccurring, make a special sheet for that. Membership, donations, social activities, rents, office material, or you can even say office material and advertising, then put those together. So now you have all these your sheets and it's very clear. And you have all the receipts attached to this sheet of papers. So at the end, you just need to balance your account where you have one sheet of paper, and on top you can write how much money was in your bank at the beginning of the year. Let's say like now 2021, on top you would write bank, so amount, cash, so amount. Then you start listing out the balance on all those sheets. So you now have membership dues, 500 euro, and this is what you do at the end of the year because you've been filling up these sheets during the year. So at the end of the year, you just have one sheet where you say, as I said up, 2021, 1st of January, bank so amount, cash so amount. Then you list your different balances from your sheet, like membership dues 500, entertainment so much, advertisement and office material so much. So you have there the description, income, expenses. At the end you balance, and under you write how much is now in the bank and how much do you have cash. So you see, by the time you have that at the end of the year, it should balance out from what you had at the beginning of the year on your bank and your cash. That is your physical cash would be there. All your expenses listed there. It will just fit on maybe one page because you would have had like 6 or 7 of these separate sheets. I call them sheets, but you know what I mean. These accounts you kept of membership dues, this, that. And at the end, you simply write December 31st, 2021, so much money on the bank, so much money cash. It's just as simple as that. For most NGOs, simple bookkeeping is enough. You don't need more than that. With this alone, with all your receipts properly attached, if you really take the pains and try to find out how, you can do your tax declaration, because what they want again, maybe the constitutions or something like that. If it was amended, they may ask you for the amended constitution. But with that alone, this simple method of bookkeeping, you can go on and do your tax declaration. And even if you need a professional, he's not going to charge you much because he's just filling the formalities in the form. You've done the whole work. All the receipts attached and tackered onto the sheet of paper. And when it's so organized like that, you find out that you don't have any problem, because It's organized, it's transparent. Nobody, if an NGO has come into life, open a bank account and get used to putting the money in the bank. Also, when the account is open, it would be clear who can access the account, who is authorized to go to the account. This habit of giving members or executive money to hold should be discouraged, because anything can go wrong. It's a risk for the finance. Sometimes it may not even be the fault of the person holding the money. You may have the money in your house, have a visitor there who takes the money also. Now, of what use is it if the person cannot even refund the money? So please get used to the idea of keeping as much money as possible in the bank. When money is being collected, membership dues and everything, even if people are paying gradually or whatever, in regular intervals, take the money to the bank. And another advantage of having money in bank is, of course, that bank statement is already a kind of bookkeeping on its own, because you can see the whole cash flow. Even if somewhere along the line things get muddled up, you can trace it when it's in the bank. And if you lose, like if a member pays into the bank account, even if the receipts get lost or something, that bank statement is there. So putting money in the bank should be really encouraged. And with this, I think I've really touched on most topics. If you have any questions, you can write it in the comment section. Please feel encouraged to form NGOs. NGOs are so vital. You have more influence as an NGO. You can get things across as an NGO. Even if you are new in a country, you can, even as an asylum seeker, having an NGO with this purpose of, catering for the interest of the asylum seekers, it's a very powerful group. The tendency is that when a letter is written with an NGO heading, it's taken much more serious than when people just write or sign. So with that, I think I've about touched most of the topics or most of the issues that come up. And as I said, please do feel free to ask any question in the comment section and I'll get back to you.